So the waiting's nearly over. Very soon we're going to know whether the United Kingdom is in or out of Europe. But how are we being seen from there? I'm joined by Helena Walsh, who is Cicero's Executive Director in Brussels, and her Deputy, James Hughes. If I could start with you, James, what's the mood in Brussels at the moment?
Well, until recently it was very relaxed actually, because really no one actually thought in Brussels that the UK would leave the EU. But there's been a big shift in the mood in the last fortnight, as we've seen the polls showing quite a sort of heavy trend towards leave. And frankly, people are very concerned, and that's an effect on the sort of tone and mood of the of leaders' comments. There's been a big effort to appeal directly to UK voters to demonstrate how important the UK is in the EU, how much we need them. Effectively, some of the leaders are even begging the UK to stay in. I think this mood will change very, very quickly, though, if the UK does decide to leave.
Helena, picking up on that, if the UK does decide to leave, what do you think the reaction would be from the other member states?
Well, certainly from speaking with officials in Brussels yesterday, particularly from Germany and Spain, the feeling is that we are on risky territory right now. A vote leave would mean that the fundamental structures and functioning of the current Union 28 member states would be fundamentally challenged. In addition to that, it would also bolster the support and the efforts of Eurosceptic populist parties across countries such as Germany, France, Italy and Sweden. And that's significant because all of these countries are heading into general elections within the next 12 to 24 months. So National Front, for example, in France has already promised that if it is elected at the next presidential elections in April of next year, it will hold an EU referendum. It is likely that other member states will follow through on that. So from the point of view of Britain exiting, Britain can it will receive little sympathy and it will not receive concessions from Germany and France in particular, who are heading into what would be very tough general elections next year.
Well, James, that's really interesting because it's been suggested by some Brexiteers in Britain that actually if we do vote out, that might be some kind of lever to get more concessions from the EU. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, it's quite a compelling argument. I mean, the UK has shown that it's serious and it's willing to leave the EU, and that could be quite a big sort of bargaining chip. But I think when you start thinking about the sort of mechanics of how a negotiation could work, it starts to become a bit more difficult. If you think a new Conservative Prime Minister would be going into negotiations, there'd be a newly emboldened backbenchers and populists in the UK, what would they demand? Well, almost certainly some strong restrictions on free movement of people. Maybe they would be looking at restoring the primacy of UK law over EU law. These are both things which, right at the beginning of the first negotiation, were rejected because they would undermine the principles of the EU. So we get back to this point where the member states are saying, we want you to stay in, but not at any cost. And I think it's very hard to see how a second negotiation could really sort of move beyond that position.
So guys, say we do remain, does everything just go back to normal? Helena?
Well, I think many people have actually forgotten that the EU referendum started on the basis of a set of negotiated reforms. So I think once we vote Remain, focus is going to sharply come back into what are the reforms, what's the detail around that. And the most controversial will of course be the package on immigration, which consists of 3 proposals, all of which have to be approved by the European Parliament, Commission and Council. And the most controversial regulation within that package is of course the regulation which is limiting access to in-work benefits for EU migrants. And I think certainly from James's connection with the Parliament over the last few weeks, there are many within the Parliament still, the European Parliament, who believe that this is a discriminatory regulation and this will not pass through easily.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are 2 reasons why it's going to be a very difficult negotiation in the Parliament. First is, as Helena was saying, it's discriminatory. It's the first big piece of legislation that actually discriminates against EU citizens. Second, it's more about how the proposals actually came about. The Council negotiated it, they presented it to the Parliament as a fait accompli, and this is exactly what the Parliament hates, being cut out of big decisions taken in the EU and not having the opportunity to exercise their sort of democratically elected voice. So I think it's going to be a very, very difficult negotiation, and I'm sure that the Parliament will set out a very, very high cost for its agreements.
So we're going to be up all night. Do follow us on social media, follow Cicero, and we will give you a blow-by-blow account all night.